Welcome to my epic English channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. It was a typical Thursday evening when I returned home from work. The house quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirp of a bird settling down for the night. Margaret, my wife of 12 years, was out as usual, probably at one of her endless charity meetings she'd grown so fond of. Lately, I tossed my keys on the table and was about to head upstairs to change when something on the dining room table caught my eye. An elegantly crafted wooden box that I recognized instantly. It was Margaret's jewelry box, a small treasure trove. She guarded more zealously than a dragon with its gold, but there it sat not only in plain view, but also unlocked. Curiosity piqued in a strange unease. Settling in my stomach, I approached the table and picked up the box. The weight of it felt heavy in my hands, heavy with secrets and perhaps more. I hesitated for a moment, knowing I was crossing a boundary Margaret had explicitly set. But something, maybe a whisper of doubt that had been growing louder over the past few weeks, nudged me forward. I flipped open the lid. Inside the jewelry lay meticulously arranged necklaces draped over velvet rolls, rings nestled into small compartments, earrings paired perfectly. But what drew my attention was not the gleam of gold or the sparkle of gemstones. It was a photograph tucked beneath a bracelet at the very bottom of the box. I pulled it out, my hands trembling slightly. It was a picture of my best friend James, the same James who had been my college roommate, the best man at our wedding, the godfather to our daughter in the picture. He was smiling that easy smile that had won him many friends. And apparently my wife's heart on the back scrawled in Margaret's familiar flowing handwriting were the words, "My true love." The room seemed to tilt as I read those words, my mind racing with a confusion of hurt and anger. I felt like a fool, a cliched middle-aged man blindsided by betrayal. A car door slammed outside, and I swiftly tucked the photograph back into its hiding spot, closing the jewelry box with a snap. Margaret walked in, moments later, her face flushed from the brisk evening air, a smile playing on her lips. "Darling, you're home early," she chirped, leaning in for a kiss that I mechanically returned, my mind still reeling from the discovery. "How was your day?" she asked, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Interesting," I managed to say, my voice steadied. Despite the turmoil, I discovered something. Today, Margaret paused, a flicker of concern. Or was it guilt crossing her face? "Oh, what's that?" "Just how valuable trust is in a marriage," I said, watching her closely. She laughed a nervous twitter that sounds serious, anything I should be worried about. "Not yet," I replied, the words heavy with a promise of the reckoning that was to come. "We'll talk later. I need to sort some things out first," as she nodded and moved away to freshen up. I sat down, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I knew what I had to do. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too raw. I would confront her, yes, but not tonight. Tonight I would plan. Margaret and James had their secrets, and now it was time for me to craft my revenge. As the night grew deeper in the house, quieter, I plotted the demise of a marriage and the rebirth of my freedom. The morning sun cast a harsh light through the windows, but the day felt dark to me as I prepared for the confrontation. My mind had raced through countless scenarios overnight, each ending with Margaret's betrayal laid bare. Today, the facade of our perfect life would crumble. Margaret was in the kitchen humming softly as she made coffee. Her ease, juxtaposed with the storm inside me, fueled my resolve. I gripped the counter, feeling the cool marble under my fingertips, grounding myself for what was to come. "Margaret," I began, my voice firmer than I felt. "We need to talk." She turned, her expression one of mild curiosity. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "It's about us, about trust," I said, watching her closely. The cup she held clanked slightly against the saucer. "Is something wrong?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes darted away for a split second, and I knew I had her attention. "I found the jewelry box open yesterday," I stated, plainly gauging her reaction. Margaret's face paled, her usual composure slipping. "Oh, and what did that tell you?" "It told me more than you'd hoped." I pushed on the words, laced with an icy calm. "I saw the picture." Margaret, the one with James, the cup she held, trembled, coffee sloshing over the rim. "I can explain." She began, her voice a mix of desperation and defiance. "I think you should," I said, crossing my arms, bracing for the lies or half-truths. She set the cup down, taking a deep breath. "It's not what you think. James and we've been close, yes, but it's not an affair, a picture hidden away with my true love written on it. That's not just close. Margaret, that's intimate. That's personal." My voice rose, the anger I'd contained now, bubbling to the surface. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but her next words were steady. "Yes, we grew close. Too close, perhaps, but it was never physical. I swear it was an emotional folly. An emotional folly." I echoed, the sarcasm biting. "And you expect me to just accept that I was going to end it?" She insisted, her hands clenched at her sides. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." I laughed to sound bitter and hollow. "A mistake that lasted how long? How many lies? How many secrets we never meant to hurt you?" She whispered, "But you did, Margaret. You both did." I stepped closer, the hurt sharp in my chest. "And now I need to decide what that means for us." Margaret reached out her hand, stopping in the air between us. "Please, let's talk about this. We can go to counseling. We can try to fix a lie." I stepped back, her gesture rebuffed. "I need some time alone to think," as I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Margaret's voice followed me, a plea wrapped in fear. "Please don't do anything rash." I didn't look back. Instead, I drove to James's place, the need for answers, for closure, propelling me forward. The confrontation with Margaret was just the beginning. Now it was James's turn to explain. The day was far from over, and my plan for retribution was only just taking shape. The drive to James's apartment was a blur, my mind a tumult of betrayal and the remnants of friendship. When I arrived, I didn't bother to park properly. My car angled haphazardly near the curb. I stormed up to his apartment, my heart pounding in sync. With each step I ascended, I didn't knock. Instead, I used the spare key James had given me years ago for emergencies. Ironic, given the current crisis. I opened the door with a force that echoed through the quiet hall. James was there, lounging on his couch, surprised and then alarmed as he took in my furious expression. "What is everything?" "Okay," he stammered, standing abruptly. "No, James, everything is not okay." I spat out, closing the distance between us. "How could you do this to me?" James's confusion gave way to a realization as he saw the rage in my eyes. "Look, whatever you think you know. I know enough." I cut him off, throwing the photograph I had rediscovered in Margaret's box onto his coffee table. It landed in front of him, the words "my true love" glaring up at us both. He glanced down his face, appalling. "It's not what it looks like." He began, his voice shaky. "Don't insult me further." I growled. "I trusted you. James, you were my brother in every way but blood." And Margaret, how long his silence was damning. How long, I demanded, my voice rising. A few months it started just as a conversation. James's words trailed off as if he realized how feeble his excuses sounded. A few months of lies. A few months of betrayal. You both decided I was worth deceiving, my hands clenched into fists, the urge to shake him overwhelming. "I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt you. It got out of hand." James pleaded, his usual confident demeanor crumbling. "I should have stopped it. We both should have. Sorry doesn't fix this." I said, my voice cold-controlled. "You both destroyed everything, and for what, a thrill, loneliness, or just because you could?" James was silent, his eyes not meeting mine. He opened his mouth to speak, but seemed to think better of it. "You'll stay away from me and my family. This ends now if I see you near Margaret or here. You've contacted her." The next photo people will see will be in a very different context. I warned the threat clear in my tone. Please let me try to make this right. James finally said desperation, lacing his words. You've done enough. I replied sharply, turning on my heel. I left his apartment, the slamming door a punctuation to our fractured friendship. As I drove away, my thoughts were chaotic. The confrontation with James had not brought the satisfaction I had anticipated. Instead, there was a hollow feeling, a mourn for the life I thought I had. The betrayal was now fully in the light, but the path ahead was shadowed and uncertain. My phone buzzed incessantly, Margaret's name flashing on the screen. I ignored it, each vibration a reminder of the depth of her deception. It was clear what needed to be done. The next steps were not just about confronting the betrayal, but about reclaiming my life and dignity from the ruins. My mind started to form a plan, one that would ensure I could close this painful chapter of my life for good. Margaret and James had made their choices, and now I would make mine. The days following, my confrontations with Margaret and James were cloaked in a heavy, oppressive silence. I moved through them like a ghost, my actions mechanical, my thoughts consumed by the betrayal and the brewing storm of retribution. The decision had been made. What remained was the execution. Margaret tried to reach me several times, her messages oscillating between pleading and anger. Each undead message fueled my resolve. I knew that if there was to be any closure, it would not come from forgiveness. On a grim, overcast Friday, I invited Margaret to meet me at our favorite cafe, the place where we had celebrated anniversaries and shared intimate moments. Over the years, it seemed fitting to end things where we had celebrated so much of our life together. As I waited, the weight of the impending finality grew heavier. With each passing minute, Margaret arrived, her face drawn, eyes red. It was clear she had been crying, but the sight sparked no sympathy in me. She sat down her hands, trembling slightly as she took off her coat. Why here? She asked, her voice, a whisper to end things where we once had the best of our times. I replied coldly to remind us of what was and what you've thrown away. Margaret flinched, but she nodded, accepting the cruel irony. What do you want from me now? Answers. I said flatly, truth for once, Wyam. Why betray me this way? It wasn't planned, it just happened. I was lonely. You were always busy and James was there. It was foolish and selfish, and I regret it more than you can imagine. Not enough to stop. I countered sharply. She looked away, unable to dispute the fact I've made my decision. I continued, my voice steady despite the raging emotions inside. I want a divorce. I want you out of my life for good. Margaret's eyes filled with tears again, but she didn't beg or plead. Perhaps she knew it was futile, that the damage was irreparable, and there's more. I added the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I've sent the picture in a letter to everyone we know. Family, friends, colleagues, let them see the real Margaret. Her face paled, shock and horror, replacing the sadness you didn't. I did, I confirmed, feeling a bitter satisfaction at her dismay. Your reputation will follow you long after your regret fades. Margaret stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. How could you be so cruel? She gasped, her voice breaking. How could you? I retorted, my anger peaking. You ruined us. Margaret, I'm just showing the world who you really are. She turned and left without another word. Her departure as quiet as the betrayal had been loud. After she left, I sat there for a long time, the weight of what I had done and what had been done to me, sinking in the cafe, emptied around me. The sky darkened, and I realized that this was no victory. It was merely the end. As I walked home alone, the first drops of rain began to fall, as if the heavens themselves were mourning the death of what we had. I understood then that revenge had not brought peace, only a deeper darkness. Margaret and James were out of my life, but the shadows they left behind would linger much longer. I had won, if one could call it that. But at what cost the love I had known was replaced by a void filled with echoes of betrayal and the cold comfort of revenge. The road ahead was uncertain, strewn with the wreckage of a life I once cherished.